Hello and welcome to this press briefing on the new finds connected to the 17th century warship Äpplet. My name is Susanna Vallejos and I work at Vrak Museum of Wrecks here in Stockholm. Today, you will hear what my colleagues Jim Hansson and Patrik Höglund, maritime archaeologists at Vrak Museum of Wrecks, have to share with us. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat. We'll get through as many as we can after the briefing. Once we are done, you can also contact us for one-on-one meetings with our maritime archaeologists. And with that, I want to welcome Jim and Patrik.
Thank you very much, Susanna. And my name is Jim Hansson.
I'm Patrik Höglund.
We're really glad to have you here and really glad to show you our new discoveries and the results we have made 2 months ago. And we have a small or a short presentation with pictures that we'd like to show you. So I think we start immediately.
Yes.
And I'd like to show you, we're going to show you a brief, the brief history on why Äpplet actually sank. And Vaxholm is one of the gates to Stockholm, and it was really important 100 years ago, but still is. They moved out the defense out there and used old warships, especially as barriers, ship barriers, to protect Stockholm, the town of Stockholm. And we first dove on this wreck site in 2021 in December. And we have a really great collaboration with the Swedish Navy. This is a protected area, so we can't tell the exact depth or exactly where it is around Vaxholm, but they're really keen on their own history, and they use this time to also learn how to do 3D documentation and help us out with archaeological data. So we dove there, and it was a big, huge wreck, and we took lots of samples and archaeological measurements, and we identified it last year, actually. So, and we have the location. According to the archives, Äpplet were supposed to have been deliberately sunk in 1659 around Vaxholm. We have the size dimensions. It's a big warship, 49 meters long and 12 and a half meters wide. The type of the ship, it's a two-decker, 2 full gun decks. We have details that are more or less the same. The technological and constructional solutions inside the Äpplet hull is exactly the same as Vasa, and we know that Vasa and Äpplet are built by the same shipbuilder. And we have the felling year of the timber. It was in the spring 1627, and the felling location of the timber. The oak came from the west part of the Lake Mälaren. So Patrik, over to you.
Yes, Äpplet is kind of hard to translate into English. The apple is the direct translation, but Äpplet is a part of the royal regalia, and in English it should be the sovereign's orb, which is hard to translate. As Jim told you, Äpplet was built by the same shipbuilder who built Vasa, or actually he took over Vasa when the first shipbuilder died in the middle of the construction of the Vasa, Hein Jakobsson. He finished Vasa and he built Äpplet. Both ships were ordered in 1625. Äpplet was roughly launched 1 year later than Vasa, in late spring 1628, and was ready for action in 1629, that is 1 year after Vasa had sunk. As we all know, Vasa wasn't not a very good ship. Äpplet was almost a good ship. We know that in this period the shipbuilders in Sweden tried to develop ships that could manage the great number of heavy guns on board and still sail, be able to sail and be functional at sea. But Äpplet was a step on the development to the good ship. We know that it was only used a few times. It was participated in the landing in Germany when Sweden invaded Germany in 1630 in the 30 Years' War. But it was only used a few times. It was for sale 3 times and declared unfit for service in 1658, which is rather early. It sailed for around 30 years or sailed. Most of the time it probably lay still. In 1659 it was deliberately sunk close to Vaxholm. Hein Jakobsson also constructed more sister ships later on, Kronan 1632 and Scepter in 1634, or Scepter. All those ships were named after the royal regalia. We don't have any pictures of how these ships looked. We just have one painting from the battle in Öresund in 1658, and that is of Kronan to the right. And what we now have been trying to do is reconstruct the stern part and also reconstruct how Äpplet looked. Äpplet was in between Vasa, which we know how it looked, and Kronan, which we have this painting. So what are we doing now? We can see, if we compare Vasa and Kronan, we can see that it has been changes. Kronan is slightly lower than Vasa, and the sculpture are in a different manner. But we don't know how Äpplet looked. We know that it was launched before Vasa sank. So how much did it change on Äpplet? That's a matter of investigation now. So the focus for 2023 was to create a 3D model, reconstruct the stern, and also look for sculptures. Did they sink these ships as ship barriers? Did they remove the sculptures first? Or can we still find the sculptures?
And we have started working with this 3D model. It's loads of material. So this is a few outtakes from the 3D model where we have looked at the construction details, especially in the stern. And it's a kind of archaeological detective work. We look at small notches, the width and the length of different types of timber. On this example we see the fashion piece and the upper fashion piece, which are the major construction timbers in the stern. And if you can reconstruct that one, you will have a good chance to see how big and what shape the stern had. So the 3D model, you can see that the stern has fallen out at the seabed, just behind the stern. And all these orange painted timbers are timbers we have managed to document, and then we have made them to reconstruct and compare with Vasa. Just as Patrick said, we know that Vasa was quite narrow and quite high in the stern, but how did Äpplet look like? We knew from 2022 that she was a little bit more than 1 meter wider at the widest part. But how did the stern look like? But now we have some interesting results here. We can see that Äpplet is about 7 meters at the widest part in the stern area. Meanwhile, Vasa is 5.9 meters. And the upper fashion piece is this thin ones that are sticking right up. On Vasa we have about 9.80 meters, and on Äpplet it's about 12 meters. So we can see that Äpplet has a different shape. She's a little bit bigger in the stern, wider, but even higher. We haven't found the upper construction at Äpplet yet, but we know about this upper fashion piece here, that it's about 2 meters higher, which is really, we were really thrilled and satisfied when we got that result, because we hadn't expected that. So this is a really interesting way to see how they try to develop these kind of ships from Vasa, and they hadn't launched Äpplet, as Patrick said, but they had made some major changes though. But they kept on trying on this stability and the sailing abilities.
Yeah, and this document from 1630 we can see in May 1630, before Äpplet sailed for Germany. We have, it's mentioned that they stowed on the big ship Äpplet over 1,000 gunshots as ballast. Iron has is heavier, more dense than stone, which is the normal ballast on ships in the 1600s. Me and Jim, we have died on I don't know how many wrecks, but we've never seen anything except for stone. But here in this document we can see that they actually stowed iron, lots of iron gun balls on the ship. So apart from trying to widen ships or make different construction solutions, they also tried to make the ships move better in the sea when sailing by using different types of ballast. And this is 1 year after Äpplet was completely ready. So they probably did some trial sailings in the Stockholm harbor and found out that the ship didn't move too well. And that's why they tried with these cannonballs.
And we were really satisfied and happy with these results, but we actually found even more spectacular finds underneath these construction details. We actually found a lot of different sculptures around the stern area, and we have pointed out some of them which we can compare with Vasa, and we can see where they have been situated on the stern, and also see what kind of figures we have, or sculptures we have on the ship. We have one here that we might think one of the Navy divers found, and we might think that this is actually the Greek Titan Atlas. We haven't made any proper investigations yet, but if that's going to be the way that this is actually Atlas, this is really interesting, because Atlas is not on the Vasa sculptures. They have Hercules, and they are in the same Greek myth, but we're not really there yet, so that's just a loose theory yet. But it's quite interesting to see difference also in the sculptures. But we also found some really nice. The first thing we saw actually when we came down was this. We saw big lions looking at us at the seabed. They are very big. They are about 80-90 centimeters long and 50 centimeters wide. And there's two lion heads, and one is a little bit more complete than the other one. But close to this lion head, the right one, we've also found another sculpture, which we might think is actually this sovereign orb, or the apple. It could be a crown, but we think it looks more like an apple, and that would be extremely cool to find the ship's name between these two lions. And if we have a look at a part of the 3D model, you can see these lions. The left lion is actually quite intact, it looks like, and you can also see this construction timber is lying on top of them. And we can see some legs and a tail sticking out, and also it may be a crown on the lion's head. So it is really fantastic results. So we have never expected this. So this is one of the coolest dive I ever done, actually. And if you have a look at it, this is the what do you say? Vad fan heter den?
Yeah, the heraldic weapon, the Swedish royal coat of arms with two lions holding the heraldic shield. We can compare with the Vasa to the left upper, and the painting we got of Kronan, the ship from 1632. And now we're trying to fit in Äpplet between those two ships. And as we can see on the Vasa, there is two heraldic weapons actually, the royal coat of arms and the Vasa dynasty's coat of arms. But on Kronan, just the royal coat of arms. How did Äpplet look?
Yeah, exactly, and that's why we try to figure out now. The theory right now is that it looks more like Kronan, and if you look at Kronan, the picture of Kronan, the both both the two lions are holding the crown, the ship's name. So we might think that these two lions also are holding the apple between. So this would be the name of the ship. But we're going to continue the excavation. But what we also can see, if this was a spectacular result that Äpplet was 2 meters higher, we can also see that all this heraldic weapon is about 1 meter higher and even more than a meter wider. So everything on Äpplet is a little bit bigger than on Vasa, actually.
It's also interesting to see that even though the sculptures are similar to Vasa and Kronan, there are differences, and probably there are differences in the story they tell on the ship. As Jim told you about the Hercules myth, and on the Äpplets you have Atlas. It's a continuation, or they complete the myth. So it's a really, they have really worked wider with this sculpture program than just one ship. It's for the all of these big ships that were constructed around 1630.
Yeah, that's extremely cool that we have a reference material now to Vasa, so we can talk about this. It's a kind of propaganda ships, probably for Gustavus II Adolphus. And we can see the difference, and we might see also different sculpture timbermen, if there are different people around these constructions and sculptures. So it's really interesting, and this is a really important find to tell a lot of the stories about the Swedish growing empire at this time, and also tell more about Vasa. Yeah, so the Äpplet research will continue. Hopefully we will go out with the Swedish Navy again, and we can also have a look at the development of the big ships. How did this actually work? We have started to compare this a little bit. When you develop a firefighter, for example, it takes a few crashes before you get it all right. And we think it's exactly the same with these big ships. And they are kind of propaganda ships. They are built in a time when Sweden is rising on the scene of Europe. So it's a really interesting period. And
we know that Vasa wasn't a good ship. Äpplet was slightly better. It's sailed, but probably not very well. But then we know that Hein Jakobsson managed with Kronan and later Scepter, managed to build really good ships that could control the Baltic Sea, which is important. And as Jim told you, the sculptures and the propaganda tells the story about the Swedish Empire and the Swedish nation. And also we can show how the defense of Stockholm worked with all those deliberately sunk ships out at Vaxholm.
Yeah, exactly, and we know that Äpplet is sank deliberately in a really hard time for Sweden when we were at war and with the Danes and the Netherlands, and also even Poland might attack us. So she ended up at the seabed as a protection to Stockholm in a really worrying time, like we see today almost in the Baltic. That's all. So we think this was one of the coolest finds ever, actually. So I hope you find this interesting, and if you have questions.
Yeah, and this is also with the Lost Navy, the program. It's about lifting these wrecks that has been deliberately sunk. And now we didn't expect to find sculptures actually on a ship that was scuttled. We thought they had removed all those sculptures, but they are still there actually.
Yeah, we can have lots of different projects now together with Vasa, so the Museum of Wrecks can contribute with new information. We can have a look at maybe the colors, at the sculptures, the history behind the sculptures, and also the techniques how to build these ships. So we are really happy for this, and really glad that the Navy also likes to contribute with their ships and their divers.
Thank you so much for that. Let's have a look at the chat. We can, I can say that anyone that wants to ask a question, please post it on our chat, and we will take a few moments to answer them. I do have a question myself, actually. What does this find mean to the field of maritime archaeology, do you think?
It's not just the wreck itself, but a little bit what we talked about previously here, that we can contribute to look in a wider perspective. Why did they build these kind of big ships? How did they develop them? And how did the language look like in the propaganda with all the sculptures? And we can also have a look at the defense, as Patrick mentioned. I don't know if you can tell some more.
The Lost Navy program is all about that. It's a really big program with over 10 different researchers trying to attack the Swedish Navy from different angles. And this is one angle. We do it from the wrecks, and from those wrecks that has not been, maybe have not been so popular in the time, so to say. But there's a lot of research that we can get out from Äpplet and also the other ships we are working with.
And so how often, I mean, you touched upon this a little bit, but like how often would you come across something like this in your career as a maritime archaeologist?
I've been diving over 30 years. I think I've never found a sculpture, and to find these several sculptures, these big lions and, on the sister ship of Vasa, and it's kind of the wreck museum's own Vasa, so to speak. I think this is on the very top of my diving expeditions ever, actually. So it's a really interesting find.
How many dives have you guys done over the course of your careers?
About 2,000, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Yeah, so that says something about like how rare this is.
Yeah, this is for me. This is the biggest find ever. It's not the best visibility. It's in Swedish murky waters, but I couldn't imagine to firstly find the Äpplet, and secondly that there would be sculptures, left on the actual scuttled ship.
Do you remember what the first sculpture was that you saw as you came down there? Like, what made you think, like, okay, this is something else? Like, and this
it was the big lion.
Yeah.
The first lion was lying flat on the bottom. That was where we saw between the beams. It was
we're doing the 3D model, taking a lot of filming really slow, and then suddenly, poof, a big lion on the seabed. It was nice.
Yeah. Yes, it's extremely interesting find, not just for us, lots of other scientists, and I think we can tell a broader history according to finds like this.
Yeah, and so could you say something about what these sculptures? You also briefly touched upon this, but I think that perhaps you could say a few more words about what they're doing on ships like this. Like, why are they there? Why have them at all?
They'll try to tell how great the king was, how brave he was, and how rich he was, and all that. And lots of stories with Roman knights or whatever, and these Greek semi-gods and all that. So I think and try to threaten people and also make them feel a little bit lower than a Swedish country like that. So there's lots of expression in these sculptures.
Yeah, there's not any ship would get these decorations, right?
Not like this, Huton.
No, these are the biggest ships: Vasa, Äpplet, and the two other big ships, Kronan and Scepter. There was something special with those 4 ships. And Vasa is really special because it's the dynasty, the Vasa dynasty, but we don't know the sculpture program of the other ships. But it's probably very, it's complicated. On the Vasa, this, as Jim told you, is Greek mythology, Roman, Swedish mythology, from the Bible, figures from the Bible, and it all tries to highlight Sweden and the king, propaganda.
Like you showed us a little bit, you can see things that you haven't been able to see on Vasa. So it's going to sort of show us or be able to share aspects of history that we really haven't been able to get to yet, right?
Exactly. When we have this reference material, it can tell us a lot more about this kind of language. Now we can compare with something built with the same shipbuilder, on the same shipyard, with the same oak, the same war, by the same king, and all that. So it's an extremely good example of how we can bring out new stuff to the history. So this is a really important find.
And it was also quite lucky because in this area around Vaxholm, we know they scuttled a lot of ships, but they have also been cleared those straits in the 1800s, after they scuttled all the ships, when steamships who had a deeper draft became normal. So they had to clear all those straits. So we thought that when we was diving there, we wouldn't find anything except for some pieces left of the wrecks. But now we have this really big,
extremely well preserved as well,
with sculptures on it.
Yeah.
So can we expect to see anything on this? Or rather, I know the answer to this, but letting you share a little bit. Can we? What can we expect to see at the museum?
We have some graphs and pictures and underwater movie on the new findings and all the reconstructions and all the comparison with Vasa on a few screens. We have also some samples in an aquarium, so you can watch some of the real stuff from Äpplet. It's going to be Äpplet theme on this weekend that's coming, so we're going to be there. So if you want to come there, just join us and we'll answer more. Or if you want to have a look yourself, you can look at the screens. Yep.
Great. So with that, we are, I think we're going to wrap up today's briefing. Thank you so much, Jim and Patrik. And if you have, if you want to contact us for one-on-one meetings, then please do that. Otherwise, visit us at Vrak Museum of Wrecks here in Stockholm or online. Thank you. Bye.